Oh yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the chorus to come back in.
Feels like the first time.
Oh yeah. It feels like the first time. Well, that was awesome.
Yeah. It feels like the first time, huh?
It truly does. I feel like I'm starting back on day one when I was like, "What up, player?" And then we didn't know what else to say after that. I just like threw that nonsense sentence out there.
I feel like we still don't know what to say after it, but we just kind of go with it now.
Yeah, just keep talking a little bit more. That's all.
Yeah, this is our first one in a while. Yeah,
I know, right?
The last episode I did was at Burning Man back in August. It's May 15th now, and
yeah.
But the last one we did together was like we just found that out.
It was last March.
No, January, I think.
Oh, last January. Oh shit.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
January of 2015. So it feels like the first time, man.
It really does. It really does. But it feels good.
Yeah. Welcome back out there to Walking the Earth podcast.
Yes, welcome one and all. I'm Justin Castle, coming in from New York City, New York.
Yeah, and I am still Mike Margulies, I think. And I'm here. I am here in Baltimore, Maryland, where I've been living for the past year and a half, basically.
Yeah, and I'm technically I'm in Astoria, New York. Still in the same place. I'm been here for 2.5 years. This November it'll be 3 years since I've moved to New York City, which is crazy to think about, because we started this thing. What was it? 2013? Was that right?
Yeah, it was September 2013. Yeah, right after I quit and went to India.
Yeah, that's wild. And now you're back.
Yeah, back and busy as ever. I guess the reason for the hiatus is because both of us have been busy.
Yeah.
Busy with all kinds of life things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose this is like the recap episode. Like, hey, what the hell we been up to?
Yeah, exactly.
Months.
Yeah. So basically, Mike and I don't know if it's just the world, or we're in the same biological clocks or whatever. We got on the phone. When was it? Earlier this week, and we're like, I've been thinking about the podcast, and
yeah.
And then why don't we do more episodes? Coincidentally we've been asked and requested to do more episodes after a hiatus of just getting into work, and Mike getting into different activities that like symposia, which we'll talk about, and being very active in the psychedelic community. I've been inundated with work. I've got a girlfriend. There's a lot of stuff we're going to talk about. But basically, this is just going to be catching up to get where we are today.
Yeah.
But we called each other out of the blue, and we're like, it's time.
Time to do it. Yeah, I feel like I've been getting different pokes from different places, different signs like, hey, it's time to do another episode again, And I don't think I ever really wanted to like end the podcast. It just, other things took some priority for a while, gave it a little bit of rest and breathing room, and we can keep running with it. Actually, some cool ideas where we're going to take it going forward too. I've got a friend out in Germany right now, and hopefully she's out there doing a little bit of rogue, hopefully some interviews while she's out there. So we'll be getting content possibly from even some different hosts soon. Yeah. So experimenting a little bit with where we want to take the show. But yeah, in the meanwhile, I guess we thought it was a good idea to sort of do a little catch up.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And we're going to, approach this thing similar to how it was before. Do, interview guests, talk about different topics, but, kind of open it up a bit, right? We want it to be about life,
I think so. I mean, absolutely down with travel stories. I think travel is always going to be like a passion, but I think walking the earth lends itself to pretty broad topics,
exactly,
including some of the work I've been doing recently, in the psychedelic scene.
Right.
There's a lot of interesting stories there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we get an interesting guest, whether they've traveled the world or not, we want to invite them on and have them share their story of what they're doing. It doesn't necessarily.
If you have a pitch for us, write to us. Mike at WTEpodcast.com or Justin at WTEpodcast.com, and we're very open to pitches.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, let's. Should we get into what we've been doing?
Yeah, let's do a recap since the last episode. Our last episode, you went to Burning Man. That was last year.
Yeah, man. Which was awesome, and anyone who's curious about Burning Man, I don't remember everything we went into. It was while I was actually at Burning Man, though. I found the fellow, Burning Man, a fellow burner who's also a traveler, and we talked about all the things. Actually, the very first episode, we touched on Burning Man also, because I stopped by and visited Burning Man. Basically, it was my last thing I did in the U.S. after I quit my job, before I kind of went traveling around for a year and change.
Yeah.
So Burning Man's always had a special place. And since then, since Burning Man this past year, which is my sophomore run at it, I've been very busy. I'll back it up a little bit, actually, even further. For folks who have been listening to the show from the beginning know some of my story was. Actually, some of the story I didn't even talk about in episode 1. A very transformative experience that I had, which led me to quitting my job and going backpacking, was I experienced with ayahuasca in Peru, which is a psychedelic medicine. And back when we recorded episode 1, I wasn't comfortable enough at that point in time to, come out of the psychedelic closet. And so I kind of talked around that really kind of pivotal aspect of the story. I kind of talked around it in episode 1.
You can really hear it, because there's parts of the story where you just kind of if you listen to Mike's voice, you can hear him getting hesitant if you really pay attention to it.
If you know me well enough, you can tell there's a very important detail missing.
There's a point where we start getting into the story of him going to Peru and, coming back to the U.S. And there's a huge gap. It's just I went to Peru and came back to the U.S. and then I was like, I was
inspired. Mystery source.
Yeah. So that.
Yeah, but you know what? What's cool though is that through this show, I actually did eventually, come out about it. It was a few episodes later, but during the course of, combination of actually doing the traveling, being out in the world, and removed from the influences that kept me more closed off about these things. And through doing this show, I eventually, in a later episode, came out about it and talked more in depth. And there's a whole episode devoted to the ayahuasca experience I had. The big thing being this jump without the rope message that came through. But it was a meaningful experience for me, for sure, that took me some time to even though it was so powerful and moving for me, it took me a long time to be open about it.
Right.
And so, after I came, sorry.
I'd say you've been open about it on the podcast from, if you can follow the history of where we've gone in the 70 something episodes, you can see where you start to post about ayahuasca and you talk about it. And that was on your trip, but even more so now, it's when you've become more comfortable about, what you want to say and how you want to say it about your experiences. And I think it definitely helps to, if you've listened, it helps to fill in, again, the gaps and speak true to who you are, Mr. Mike.
And I think that backstory in a lot of ways is the personal influence and motivation behind the work I'm doing now. Which, and for those folks who don't know, I haven't really talked about it much actually on the show. Even after we were doing a few episodes since I was back in Baltimore, but it didn't really go into it. But as it was germinating through this time, I've started a series in Baltimore called Psychedelic Seminars. Also involved with, I'm also one of the main movers and shakers in another organization called Symposia. And, we're doing all kinds of, we're doing events all along the East Coast. A lot of them, some of them are lectures from noteworthy people doing research in this scene. Some of them are stories, just personal anecdotes of people who have had transformative experiences or even bad trips, because that's important to highlight too. Our agenda with all the work that we're doing is not to spread reverse propaganda about what drugs or psychedelics are, but just to facilitate more honest conversations about them, about all sides of it.
And I think that there's a lot of, I've gone to a couple of these events, and it's interesting hearing from the various different people that are out there. Your neighbor's dad, your librarian, all these different people who have had different experiences with it, but aren't willing to, share that with the world because of fear of being either persecuted or losing their job or any number of different consequences from expressing it, that in this space feel willing to be open and express themselves. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting to hear, the different people from different walks of life express their experiences with psychedelics. And, I'd say not most, but I'd say a large portion of the population has done so and just doesn't want to talk about it or have an open discussion, which is what Mike's organization aims to do, is just talk about what it is, people's experiences with them, with psychedelics in general, and how we perceive it as a society. And I think, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. It was for so long for me, I was using psychedelics while I was working in my corporate job, but I kept very closed off about it. I couldn't come back to work on Monday and, someone says to me, "Hey, Mike, how was your weekend?" And I could just say, "Oh yeah, I had a life-changing experience on LSD." It's not exactly easily received. Well, maybe it would have been if I had the balls to talk about it. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I certainly felt that, though, that I couldn't be honest about it. And so they say, be the change you want to see in the world. And so for me, it was, it's a lot of irony to it in a lot of ways, a lot of beautiful irony, I should say. Because after I quit this job and I started traveling, and then I came back to Baltimore, and I actually wasn't. When I came back to Baltimore, I did not plan to stay here. I had a flight back to Asia. My whole life plan was to stay traveling, and it was the day before my flight when I decided to stay. I wanted to be closer to home. It was like, hey, I've been traveling around the world trying to find a home, and like, why not try home? And then once that decision was made, it was like, well, what do I do now? And I wanted to do something I was passionate about. And I actually went to Miami and visited with an old friend who has been a guest on this podcast, Mariana. I recorded an episode actually while I was down there, and because she was like a little bit ahead of the curve. She had done backpacking, came back to the U.S., figured something out, and I wanted to get inspiration for what I wanted to do. And while I was in Miami, I found myself talking about this ayahuasca experience to some people. And the next day, we were at like a cafe, and I was saying to them, yeah, I don't know what I want to do though. Now I'm in the U.S., like I don't know what I'm passionate about. And they looked at me like, are you fucking serious? And so it was.
Is that what she said? Did she say that?
Huh?
Yeah. Did she say that, or you came to that realization?
No, this wasn't. No, this was another friend I made while I was there. Like I had the night before. I was talking. There were two friends there, and I was talking. Well, one of which I had met in Thailand actually, and a friend of hers that was hanging out with us. And I was telling the two of them about my ayahuasca experience, and they were just very receptive ears to it. They were really interested, and so I was, when I have that kind of an audience, I'm always happy to talk about it when I have a receptive audience. And so it was just the next day, and it was like this obvious thing in front of my face, and I couldn't see it. And then he pointed out to me, like, it's really obvious, something that you're passionate about. And so, yeah, at that point,
it makes sense in retrospect, right?
In retrospect, it made total sense. And then the other ironic part about the whole thing is, Baltimore, like, our hometown is one of the best places in the world to be doing this work, because Johns Hopkins University, which is right here in Baltimore, is leading the way as far as research into therapeutic uses for psychedelics. And not just therapeutic uses, they're also helping people have religious experiences with psychedelics, get over their fear of death. Like, they're doing really rad research, and it's right here. And this whole time in my backyard.
I had no idea. I had no idea when you told me these types of things. Like, you went to different lectures and talks with people who are actually conducting it, and I had no idea that in our own childhood backyard that they're doing this kind of cutting edge research. And it's interesting. Like, when we were growing up there, we never really, like, you went to Taco Bell, you went to school, and then you went to college, and then then we wound up working and never really, like, got to explore that kind of stuff. But here it is, right in our backyard.
Yeah, exactly. Hopkins. It's pretty amazing. And
where did you actually find that? Where did you hear that for the first time about Johns Hopkins?
I don't know, but so I think around the time that back in February, when I made this trip to Miami and made this decision that I wanted to be involved in this space, I basically I made it my mission to insert myself into this into this space. And so I feverishly started following all the different groups that I knew about that were doing. So the biggest one that I was aware of was MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And whereas Hopkins is doing their work with psilocybin, which is the active chemical in mushrooms, MAPS works with MDMA, which is, what's the active chemical and what's sold as ecstasy, or what's supposed to be, at least nowadays. Ecstasy can be like a lot of things that are not actually MDMA. But MAPS is the biggest one. So I started looking into what MAPS was doing and following other publications that were out at the time. I just started I started searching out and just liking every page on Facebook related to it, searching on Google. I just sought out the information and set myself up so that the information would filter to me, and so I could figure out the lay of the land, essentially. And so I think, somewhere in there, it became. I realized, oh wait, Hopkins is doing this work. What? And so I cold emailed some of the researchers there, and they wrote back to me. They weren't at the time. I was just some schmuck, like, oh, I'm starting a psychedelic meetup group, and I want you to tell who the hell am I?
Hey, that's how it happens.
They were totally cool and like responded to me, but they didn't agree initially to like do a talk or whatever. But since then, I've grown great relationships with everyone in that group, basically, and have worked with a lot of them on seminars and the like. So it's been cool.
Yeah.
And not just the Hopkins stuff. I mean, Baltimore is a really interesting grounds in a lot of ways. It is. I mean, if you've seen The Wire, that Baltimore is the front line of the war on drugs, and a great example of how the war on drugs is not working. And there are a lot of activists. Look at what happened last year with the riots and with Freddie Gray. And you wonder, if there was no war on drugs, would this thing have happened? And maybe it would have, because
I think I think there's also class things.
Yeah, there's classism, racial struggles, and maybe if the weapon wasn't the war on drugs, there would have been some other blunt tool that would have been used. Who knows? Right. But it's intertwined for sure. And there's groups like LEAP, which is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. These are former cops who speak out against the drug war. Many of them are from Baltimore. So it's from several different fronts. Baltimore is a very interesting place to be doing this work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the first thing that people talk to me about when I say I'm from Baltimore is they talk about The Wire and they talk about drugs and that whole situation. So it's kind of ironic that at the same time that you and Johns Hopkins are doing, trying to do cutting edge research and discussions to help change people's perceptions of this, war on drugs and psychedelics and things like that. And, and I want you to clarify for people out there, like, what, I don't know if you want to get into it. It's kind of heated or heavy, but you're not advocating for all drugs, all forms of drugs, right? You're only. Go ahead.
I'm not advocating for any drugs.
You're not advocating for any drugs. Okay.
No,
right.
I'm advocating for honest conversations about drugs. It's not about, I'm not going to say like, oh, everyone should go do psychedelics. Like, no, I don't think everyone should. There are certain people who probably shouldn't. It might not be helpful for you. It might be harmful depending on what sort of conditions you have. On the other hand, it's possible that psychedelics could help with some of those conditions. I'm not an expert on these things. I'm just the guy who knows the experts.
I'm a guy who knows
these
a
things
guy.
these are powerful tools that can be very beneficial used with the proper set and setting, like your mindset and the intentions you bring into it. And if you have the proper supportive atmosphere, these can be extremely powerful tools. However, they also can be very dangerous because they're powerful.
Right.
And so it's about proceeding with caution. I don't know if this is what you're getting at though, but I don't like playing the game though that some people play, which is that the my drugs are better than your drugs game, because some people like to play the argument of but psychedelics aren't really that dangerous. Like it's not like heroin or something.
Right.
And I get that argument, and yes, there is truth to that. Like you're not going to overdose on LSD.
Right.
You're not going to be addicted to LSD or other psychedelics for that matter. Like heroin, does lend itself to more likelihood for abuse, for overdose, and for addiction. But I don't like the game. I also, at the same time, although I acknowledge that, I don't like playing the game of, well, my drugs are better than your drugs, because I think even a drug like heroin needs a more honest conversation, because it does have medical
problem.
use. I mean, they use it in hospitals in the UK the same way that we use morphine here. I mean, it's not that different from morphine. Heroin is diacetyl morphine. It's a couple little atoms different. The idea of there being something called a Schedule I drug, which is defined in our country as something having no accepted medical use, is kind of
it's not right, because
it's absurd.
There's some
fucking
use
absurd
for everything, right?
It's all about the dose and the setting and the mindset. And so with the right setting and dosage, different substances can be beneficial, therapeutic, and they can be destructive. And we made a dialogue in the country. The war on drugs was based on a dialogue of identifying categories of drugs, as if the substance itself is the thing. Like, this drug is bad. And there's a list of these drugs that are bad, and then there's a list of drugs that are okay that you can get from your pharmacy and your doctor, and those ones are okay.
But those used in the wrong quantities are just as bad as the other ones.
Right. It's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not about which drugs are good or bad. Like, illegal drugs can be helpful and pharmaceutical drugs can be harmful, and vice versa, And so it's not about labeling drugs as good or bad and which drugs are okay, which drugs are bad. It's, well, what are the ways that what are the risks for the various drugs, and what are the benefits of them, and what are the ways that we can use them more responsibly? And that's what the conversation should be about. So really, in a strange way, it's not about the drugs at all.
Yeah, right. I hear you. And I intended to ask a question so you could clarify for everyone, and myself included, what you are going after. And it's a discussion. It's not. I guess I used the term wrong. Like, you're not an advocate for drugs. You want to have a dialogue about them, and that's what I wanted to clarify for. So I can properly talk about myself, and so people listening understand what you are talking about. But it's really interesting. I've never really told you this until now, as I'm saying this, but
you got a secret you're about to spill?
I do have a secret, and one thing honestly is, towards the end of our first real run, I guess through the episode like 68 through 70, I kind of got turned off from all of the, psychedelic conversation, and from, do I want to be connected with a podcast or, a person who's talking about these things? How's it going to look on me? How is my job, or anybody who listens or talks about Justin going to perceive me? on a podcast that only talks about, or that is increasingly talking about these things openly, and my reaction was to shy away. And I never have told you that, but honestly, in the time that you've done this work and moved forward with, symposia and talking about psychedelics openly, I myself have gotten more comfortable with, my feelings towards certain substances and just having a conversation about them. But I realized at the same time that, your feelings are not my feelings towards the same topic, that I agree on a lot of different parts of it. However, you are your own individual. I'm my own individual, and we bring in our different perspectives, and that's what makes talking about this so interesting. And at the same time, like, I think I've grown up from going to your different talks and, seeing you and hearing you talk about these things, that I'm okay with talking about them. And I am not the guy who's going around doing this kind of stuff all the time. That is not who I am. But why should I not have a conversation about it openly and discuss it? Because it's a topic that is very hot and important right now, and it's going to become increasingly important as things start to become legal. Like, marijuana is going to be legalized in a large part of the United States very shortly. The next conversation is exactly what you're talking about now. So,
yeah,
I think I've done some growing up myself, and I didn't want this to become a podcast that's only about psychedelics, and that was my fear. And maybe it is. It's definitely become more so, but I think that the fact that we're talking about it, it's an interesting topic. It's very relevant, and why should I be fearful of that? Like, embrace it. Let's talk about it. If I disagree, I should express myself, or if I'm uncomfortable, I should embrace that discomfort and bring it to your attention, bring it to everyone's attention, because why not? Why not talk about it? Why not get it out there? But I don't think I've ever told you that, but
yeah,
I felt it was appropriate.
No, man. I mean, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. And that encapsulates the entire point of the work that I'm doing, is to have these conversations. And like, actually, the stuff you're talking about is kind of like one of the big lessons that psychedelics teaches you, is like, you go into that thing that you're afraid of and look at it. And, like, that is the psychedelic experience in many ways. And so, I think that's the whole point. And what we're trying to do is, we're just trying to encourage the dialogue. And for example, as a good example of this, one of our projects that we're starting to ramp up on right now is Symposia Magazine. And we have kind of a preview edition that's available online now. If you go to Symposia, by the way, is spelled with a P, silent P, like in psychedelic, because we're cute like that. So it's Psymposia. So at symposia.com/magazine, you can see a conversation we started around what we were talking about earlier, coming out of the psychedelic closet, which is, obviously part of my own story. And this podcast is how it was my coming out. But what we have in that piece is we have Nishay Devno. She got her PhD essentially in psychedelics in literature at Penn. And she wrote a piece comparing coming out as being psychedelic to coming out as gay. And so she went into depth making this comparison about being psychedelic as a civil rights issue. And then, but what I'm really thrilled about the most is we then have reaction pieces. We have, I think, 7 or so reaction pieces that we're going to be trickling out over the next few weeks with people from all across the board. Some agreeing and some disagreeing. Some people saying, hey, no, you shouldn't be appropriating that language. You shouldn't be comparing this to civil rights issues, because it's not the same. And that's kind of our point, is not to be, say, pushing a certain view, but we want to be a forum for the conversations, to move the conversations forward in an open and honest way.
Yeah. And I think that you guys have definitely done that, and you yourself particularly have done that with your psychedelic seminars, and I've gone to a couple of them, and I've also gone to this a couple of symposia events and after parties, and it's definitely really interesting, hearing people discuss it and talk about the issues, who are, very well educated people who are either working with these substances from a professional standpoint, or have, some of them have, experienced them. It's a variety of different exposures, but it's definitely, I'd say making it more accessible and more commonplace, at least in my mind. I don't think until this podcast that we're talking about, I've felt as comfortable talking about it. If you noticed in the past, like, yeah, of course I'd add my 2 cents and say a witty reply, but I definitely feel a lot more comfortable about it as a result of being exposed to these types of things. And the fact is that I'd go home. Was it this past winter or last year? You'd come over to my house with my parents, and they'd be asking, what's Mike up to? And then I'd tell them, and then we'd have a discussion with my mom and my dad sitting at our kitchen table. How do they feel about this? How do I feel about this? And, is there a place for it in the world? Is there not a place for it? Especially because my mom is, in fact, a pharmacist and is very aware of how drugs affect people, and, dosing, and worried about studies, and very aware of those types of things. So I'd say in that regard, it has definitely brought it into my world, more so than it's ever been in the past. And I felt more open about it, myself. And there's no reason the thing is, like, I don't want the whole episode to be about this, but I do want to say that I do think it is a double standard that everyone, or almost everyone that I know, has had some type of experience or wants to have some type of psychedelic experience, and you're not willing to discuss it in a public forum for fear of losing a job, for fear of, being talked down to, or being perceived as a certain type of person. Just like you can go to the store, you can drink on a weekend or whatnot, or you can go to the pharmacy and take ADD meds and all these types of things. It's just another discussion. Is, what's the place for Adderall in the world? What's the place for all these other types of meds in the world? And I am going through this. This is affecting me right now. I took medication from I think it was 3rd or 4th grade through 10th grade for ADD, and I opted out because I didn't like the way it affected me socially in 10th grade. And in recent days, I don't think I've told you this, Mike, but I'm on a trial right now for a long-acting, long-release ADD med, and I'm approaching it very, very cautiously. Like, I'm taking notes, I'm seeing how I react to it, if I like it, if I like how I feel on it, if it's helping me. And that's just the kind of person I am. I dip my toe, and I analyze the crap out of anything I do, any purchase that I make. I don't know if everybody else is the same way, but if I'm buying a computer, I research the shit out of every type of computer that could possibly fit those specifications. And I do want a split core. I do want extra, extra RAM. I do want, all the high def screen. And then I go in and I purchase after researching the shit out of something. And I think that's how everyone should approach. I don't know if you have to approach it that way, but you should at least, have that type of insight, and have those types of discussions about these types of substances. Yeah. And like you said, medically, there's no reason not to explore them medically, right?
Yeah, and Yeah, I mean, I think you raise a really good point, though. So as much as I'm out and I'm banging drums as far as like, hey, let's reinvestigate these things we've been told are bad and have no medical use, well, maybe they do. We should also need to do the opposite question, which is what you're getting at right now, which is the things that we have been told, hey, these are the good drugs. Take this, take two, call me in the morning kind of thing. We need to investigate those on the opposite way and say, hey, are these the drugs we should be doing? So, and certainly there are times and places in humans where Adderall can be something helpful to them, but we really should ask ourselves the questions of, does this make sense that the rate at which we are prescribing Adderall to children, if we have a system where, I don't know what the numbers are, but some, not small percentage of kids are being diagnosed with ADD or what have you and being prescribed a drug, does that mean there's a problem with all these children, or is there something wrong with the system?
Right.
These are the types of questions we should be asking. Do we want to just be taking drugs? And and we tend to, if we get prescribed something by a doctor or a pharmacist, we just take it. We kind of skirt off responsibility, I guess, our own individual responsibility, because we have other people making those decisions for us. We have lawmakers and doctors and pharmacists that can tell us what's okay and what's not and what to do. And what you're doing, I commend you for it, because like you're taking personal responsibility about, well, because you're the person who can figure out what a drug does to you.
Right.
Aside from any studies that are there's great, and I'm glad the science is all happening, but also, there's a big individual responsibility aspect to this conversation.
Absolutely. And I do want to say particularly about ADD meds that, there are positives and there are negatives. And, the fact that it's all tying into what's happened the past 6 months of my life and the past 2-3 months of my life. Like I'm back to where we were when we started this thing. It's time for another change in my life, and one of the aspect is work-wise. And I am at a point where I've done a lot of research about career and about who I am. And one of the things that I learned is that, I took an aptitude test with Johnson O'Connor, which is a research firm that tests aptitudes. They've been testing aptitudes since the 1920s and have almost 100 years worth of data about if certain tests. You put a block together and try to see how fast you can do that. You try to memorize certain words and see how many you can memorize. And there's a bunch of different tasks you do, and they have a correlation between, people doing those tasks and having certain aptitudes and being a better fit for a certain line of work, or, interacting with people a certain way. These are just trends. And he approached it in an engineering method, a statistical method, and a scientific method to try to find correlations between the two, the tests and the results. And one thing I found is I have low graphoria. And graphoria is the ability to do paperwork, the ability to read and comprehend. And I am in the lower percentiles of doing those types of tasks. And I scored very lowly. And the thing is that ADD or is that just me? And there are other tests that I scored very highly on. Structural visualization, being able to imagine 3D shapes and objects, which helps with engineering and being creative and a bunch of different aspects of, visualization and interacting with the world. I'm good with directions. I'm good with all that kind of stuff. And it makes a lot of sense. But the real question is, does this show that I am just a person who has a hard time with paperwork and I need help with that? And ADD meds help me to focus in and get the paperwork done on a daily basis? Or is it just me? Am I just a person who can't do paperwork and therefore I should do a job that is more suited to my abilities versus, So I think that's a societal question of whether do we pursue, aptitude testing our kids and seeing if they should be better suited towards a certain lifestyle as opposed to trying to give them ADD meds to help them do their homework or paperwork.
Right. So like, yeah, the question of like, yeah, what we do as a standard, as our society now is, yeah, we try to fit everyone into the same box, and we have standardized tests, and we have classrooms, and we have a certain regimented way of learning, and we try to, and people who don't fit that specific model of learning, we try to force them into it. And the question, yeah, you're getting to a really important question, like, should we be doing that, or should we be doing the opposite? Should we be figuring out what individual kids and humans in general are best at? Like there's the word, I love this word, it's used I think in the autism spectrum community, the phrase neurodiversity. And it's like, yeah, maybe we should be celebrating neurodiversity, not trying to force everyone to be the same, but let's look at the different positives that different people possess and allow each other to amplify our positives. If you ask me, I think that's certainly a healthier way to approach it versus forcing ourselves all to be the same in some whatever capacity.
And here's the thing is it would break down some of our societal structures to reinvent the education system, because everything would be tailored to certain groups and to certain types of personalities and abilities. And it would be so costly that the government would be unable to
not necessarily though,
pay for.
Right?
I mean, think about it. It's
that's the threat, I suppose.
The threat is to destroy the existing system.
But maybe we just redefine what education is. It doesn't necessarily have to be about teaching a certain same information, but you facilitate students, giving them the tools to be able to learn about what they want to learn about. And so it kind of redefines what a teacher is in a lot of ways. It's not, you're not telling somebody what is what, but you are enabling somebody to learn. And in the age of Google and information at our fingertips, I think that's increasingly where education is going and probably should go, is just we need to not teach people the facts of what, or a version of the facts, but we should enable people to discover for themselves and to learn and to explore and to invent what they're interested in.
Right. And I think that once society embraces that, we're going to start to excel at an astronomical pace. Like, I think that we've hit the ground running with education system, okay? We thought of what's the best way to benefit the most people in the past 100 years and try to establish an education system which has advanced our society as far as it has, or the U.S. Let's just talk about the U.S. And then I think the next level is to understand each individual's contribution to society and to embrace that, to embrace those skill sets for what they are, as opposed to trying to beat them down with either medication or other, or having to do paperwork or certain things. I mean, there are certain skill sets you have to do in order to, survive as a societal member. But if you can embrace those skill sets, like my ability for being able to visualize 3D structures, or to, I've got great color differentiation. I should be, I could tell I'm really good at telling the difference between pink and chartreuse, like whatever. But embrace those skills.
Yeah.
And I think that we will excel.
Well, and to add on to all this, I think we're hitting on, in this conversation and the one earlier, and also this show in general, is hitting on a really similar theme, which is the idea of the individual, right? And so we have societies that are structured that, everyone should go learn about schools in these ways and behave in these ways and take these certain types of jobs. And, I, of course, rebelled against that. Or we should take these substances and not these substances. And there's this idea that's pervaded through society that, like, we can figure out the way that people should be. And I will ever be the advocate that, no, there's not about defining for everybody what you should be, whether it's education or a job or what substances you want to take, but we should enable each other to do what we're drawn to, and to do it in healthy and safe ways, and really support each other in whatever ways that we want to find our own way to contribute.
Yeah. And it's a difficult, very, very complex topic, but maybe
that's what the show's about now, huh?
Yeah, it is about changing society
or being an individual. Maybe that's what it was always about.
I think I think that's what it's always been about, Mike. It's been about being an individual, going through life, trying to find your calling or your self,
as you walk the earth.
Exactly. I think that's what it is. It's the meaning of life, basically. Right?
I like that. Hey, you know what, man? I feel like this is a really good note to start to wrap up on. I don't know. I mean, this is good.
Yeah. The meaning of life. And I guess, and next time we'll have to get more into, I know we've talked about a lot what you've done, and we have still more to talk about where we've progress over the past year. I know I've got some more discussion to have, but maybe it'll surface through the next episodes, but we'll talk about that more.
Sure.
Anyway.
Well, if you've got something else, hey, by all means, man. I mean, I'm not trying to cut anything off here. If you've got something you really want to let out, by all means, man.
Not really. I mean, it's basically I wanna tell the world my personal, milestones over the past couple of months and year. But honestly, it's something we need to discuss more as things come along. A lot of the personal searching that I've done, the struggles. I just turned 30, and that was a milestone itself. And I think that in itself is something I want to talk about, and the fact that when you turn 30 or have any of these milestones, your quarter life, your 21st birthday, all that stuff, it's a time to reflect about who you are as an individual, where you're going, and you start to second guess. You definitely have some mild, anxiety and depression about reflecting where I am, where do I want to be, and then at some point, at least in my circumstance, I've, come to terms with that. And I want to talk about all these different areas. There's so many different things I want to talk about, career searches and about work and jobs and all that kind of stuff. Because it all pertains to walking the earth and existing on this planet. So I don't know. I guess we should wrap it up for now, and we can get into it more in next episode.
Sure. Okay. That works for me. We should be doing more of these now. We can get back into the swing of it,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna leave a couple. If anyone has listened through this far in the episode, you're probably interested for me to make the plugs I want to that are related to this. So, those of you, again, symposia.com, PSYMPOSIA. You can figure out what we're doing as far as storytelling events that might be in your area, or our magazine, and we've got a lot of videos as well. Or if you're in Baltimore, check out Psychedelic Seminars. You can go to psychsems.com, PSYCHSEMS.com, and this will probably be posted before the next event, which is Friday, May 20th. We're doing a screening of a film about the Good Friday experiment, which is where psychedelics were given to a bunch of graduate students during a Good Friday service back in the 60s. This is with Tim Leary and all these characters. So having a screening of that, and then a discussion with the director, as well as with Bill Richards, who's one of the researchers at Hopkins who's been doing this work since the 60s, psychedelic research. So he's one of the elders in this scene. So yeah, folks in the Baltimore area, that's happening, psychsems.com. And I think those are my plugs from this episode. Anything you want to shout out to?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. In the past, year or so, I've been involved with increasingly in comedy. For those of you out there that are interested, you can check us out. My sketch comedy team, BiouxComedy.com, BIOUX comedy.com. We're constantly having live events, sketch shows, and releasing everything on YouTube. If you want to YouTube us, just search for BIOUX comedy, one word, no space.
I will make a personal recommendation. I went to a show that Justin, you were the producer of that show. Is that the title?
Yeah,
where
I produced it.
It was like it was sketch comedy themes around a elementary school assembly. And I think I just happened to be in New York for something in the psychedelic space, and like around the time when you were doing this, so it was great. I got to see it. Yeah. It was awesome. This was put on by View Comedy, right?
Yes. Produced by myself and View Comedy.
So I'll recommend it.
Yeah, thanks. And we're hoping to get it picked up, hopefully by one of the theaters in New York City. If not, I want to take it around. That's just a pet project of mine. I'm hoping to do that. And we're having stand-up shows, live sketch shows, video sketch shows, and throughout the year, and releasing different videos on YouTube all the time. So check us out there.
Yeah.
But that's all.
And we'll
I got.
link to all these things on the as always on the show notes for the episode, which you can find at wtepodcast.com.
Yeah, for sure. But in the meantime, thanks for listening to Walking the Earth podcast. This is Justin Castle from New York City, New York, signing off.
And this is Mike Margulies in Baltimore, Maryland, saying ciao.
See you later.